So our courses are legal liability. So before we get to the screen, we're gonna just summarize the whole concept why this legal liability is being done, as well as the what exactly it is. I think the words itself, when you say legal liability, the phrase itself, it tells us about something, isn't it? Is it your first time doing legal liability?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but legally, you know what is legal, right? What is legal?
The law.
The law.
The
Liability,
right way.
the right way. Liability,
Mm. Responsibility.
responsibility. Yes. So, what we are going to look at muchly is the law itself. Then, this law gives us responsibilities. So it means now if we have responsibility that are given by law, no one can be above those responsibilities because it's the law which tells us what to do and what not to do. So we need to make sure that whatever that we do is within the framework of the law. So these laws that we have different types of law, and some of them they are applicable to your activity. Some of them they are not applicable to your activity. We have a lot of laws that govern health and safety, as well as production and workplaces in South Africa. But we have what we call the Mining Health and Safety Act. The Mining Health and Safety Act is for those who are in the mining industry. So they have to understand the Mining Health and Safety Act because that is where their responsibilities are explained. Then we do have the Aviation Act, which is for those who are in the aviation industry. So they have to adhere to the Aviation Act. We do have the Maritime Act for those who are in the marine industry. Then we have the OHS Act 85 of 1993. So the OHS Act 85 of 1993 governs any other workplaces except those three that I have mentioned, which is the mining, the marine, and the aviation. So our OHS Act has got 50 sections in it. So, starting with the Act, as we know that the Act is promulgated by Parliament. So, the Parliament they promulgate an Act. When they promulgate an Act, then the President will sign the Act into law, which means after the President's signature, that Act became a law. But when it is still in the Parliament, it's still due for debate, where they can now come to an agreement to say, yeah, this is fine. Let us now making sure that this is passed as a law. Then as long as it is passed as a law signed by the president, that automatically makes it become a national law. It now controls the national activities. Then when the act is there, it gives us directives in terms of what companies must do, what companies must have. But it doesn't tell us how can we do it. So we'll now have regulations. Regulations are made by the minister of the activity. So, for example, if we get to the mining, we have the minister of mines who will now make regulations for the mines. We have the minister of environmental and what we make the regulations based on the environment. Then we have those who are in the trade and industry. The minister who is there will also make those regulations. Then regulations, they are like a guideline. They now tell us how can we fulfill the needs of the act because they have procedures in them on what requirements, what must be done, so that we cannot find ourselves being liable for certain things that can happen. So that is the regulations. So these regulations, we also have what we call bylaws. Bylaws, they differ from one province to another. If we are in Gauteng, if we go to the metropolitan, they have their bylaws. If you go to other province, they have their bylaws. So the bylaws, they just control the activities of such province. So they cannot extend beyond that. But they are also aligned to the national what? To the national regulations as well as to the national act. So that is the bylaws. So which means now when we are talking about legal liability, we are now looking at the interpretation of the law itself. What exactly this law is all about? What does this law requires us to do? Then it means now those people will get responsibility as per the law. It's now your duty to implement what the law requires you to do. If you fail to implement, you will now be liable for whatever that happens. So that is it. But the whole idea of this legal liability is to make sure that we create an environment where we have safety culture. We need to create a safety culture environment. So safety culture simply is made up of making sure that we have control measures in place for whatever that arises as a hazard within our organization. We communicate our control measure properly so that we have cooperation within the organization, and we make sure that people are competent on whatever that they are doing. So now, just to give you a summary of the OHS Act, we have Section 7. Section 7 of the OHS Act requires each and every company to have what we call a health and safety policy. So if you go to the OHS Act 85 of 1993, it addresses the requirement of a health and safety policy within an organization. So this safety policy must be aligned with the legislations of what governs your activities as a company, which means we cannot just make a policy or draft a policy which can satisfy a certain group of people, but it must be accumulative. It must be something that is inclusive, whereby employees from the lowest ranked employee to the toppest party, they have a consultation in terms of, guys, this is what we want to create as our policy as a company, and our policy must be aligned with the legislation. So when we have in a policy, in a health and safety policy, which is aligned with the legislations, it means now that policy must be communicated. So in terms of communication, we require to make sure that, number one, all employees during induction have got that copy of policy, and they have to sign to acknowledge that they have read it and understand it properly. Yes. Then the visitors, they will be inducted. So visitors will be inducted based on your health and safety policy. So they now have to sign for induction and prove that they've gone through your major points of your health and safety policy. Depends on where exactly they are visiting, and they sign and acknowledge that they really understand. Then furthermore, your company now will be required to display a policy statement. So a policy statement must be displayed at areas where employees, visitors, and anyone who visits or who is engaged with your company must have to see it. So display of that safety policy will be a requirement. Then we have other policies that are applicable to the organization. For example, all pandemics. Whenever there is a world pandemic recorded, there is a requirement of a national act which governs and control the spread of that pandemic. Like, for example, recently we do have COVID-19 Act still existing. We have the HIV and AIDS Act still existing, which means HIV and AIDS policy must also be there. That policy addresses those people who are infected, what they must do to prevent the spread of that virus. The COVID-19 policy also be there, aligned with the COVID-19 Act, and must be communicated accordingly. Then, as we are working in an environment where we receive different types of people, groups of people, then we need to have a special need policy. So special need policy addresses how do you deal with people with the special needs. So we are looking at handicapped people or any disabled people who associate with your activities as a company. Because you might otherwise be having clients, then clients, they are coming here for a meeting. When they come here for a meeting, they want to also be safe within your organization. having a parking which is designed for them so that they cannot struggle since they are disadvantaged. So they have their toilets which are accessible for them, the areas where you organize for meeting accessible for them, evacuation procedures associated and easily accessible also to them. So that's a requirement. So that is where we have a special need policy. Then we need to have our what? Our equal opportunities policies, because there's an organization. In order for us to deal or to remove what you call corruption within an organization, there must be equal opportunities. So if there are opportunities developing within the organization, what is your hiring policy? How do you select? How do you promote your staff? All those that has to be having a policy in terms of what must be done. Then that is the then we have dispute policy, because we know that wherever two, three, and four and more people gathers, it's not all of us who can have the same what mentality. So we tend to oppose sometimes. We tend to disagree sometimes. So how do you solve your disputes? Are your disputes not to be permanently within you? That when you see someone, you are talking about him, bad mouthing about that person, and all those that can also reduce the growth of the company. So we look at such policies. So we have a vast number of policies that has to be included. And as long as we have a policy, the policy must be communicated properly to whoever that the policy is applicable to. So that is our section 7. Then we have section 16.1. 16.1 is our CEO. Then 16.2 is the project manager or the general manager of the company. There are legal appointments. So 16.1 is a legal appointment. A person appointed as a 16.1 takes the duties of the CEO. And the duties of the CEO, there are also the duties of the employer, which means when there is a legal appointment of 16.1, that person is responsible for the duties of the employer as well. So you can assign all the duties and responsibility as an employer. So that person cannot be just be given such a position by mouth. So he has to be appointed and accept the appointing by signing. So as long as now you bind yourself to accept the appointment, it means you are now responsible for the duties that you are being given. So we're going to discuss those duties, including the duties of the employer. Then our 16.2, which means 16.1 has got powers to appoint 16.2, which is a project manager or a general manager who can now manage generally all activities of that workplace. So it means when that 16.2 is appointed, he also carries the duties of the employer. So whatever the employer is required to do, that means 16.1, 16.2, they must do those duties. They must fulfill those duties. Then the 16.2 has got powers to appoint what we call the 8.1. So the 8.1, we are talking about the line managers. So other line managers, now we have a manager for transport, we have manager for land review, we have manager for waste collection, whatever that you guys are doing. So there will be line managers. So these line managers, they also represent the employer, is they are appointed under section 8.1. Then 8.2 is the supervisors. So supervisors under OHS Act, they are appointed under section 8.2. So supervisors, they also represent the employer because they also carries out the duties of the employer. So the appointment letters now gives them responsibilities of what they really must do. So we spoke about section 7, 16.1, 16.2, 8.1, 8.2, and these people represent the employer. So section 8, that is where the duties of the employer are explained. And what are those duties? So just to summarize the duties of the employer, it is the employer's duty to make sure that the workplace is free from hazard, risks are assessed, and controlled. So which means when such duty is assigned, what is the requirement in terms of implementation from these employers' appointees is to make sure that they have a risk assessment in place. So for them to fulfill that duty, they must make sure that there is someone among them who have a responsibility to draft risk assessment. So our risk assessment will be divided into three. We have a baseline risk assessment, which covers the whole company A up to Z. So it's in and out of your company. All hazards being identified, risks being assessed, control measures being implemented. But this baseline gives us now what we call procedures, your internal procedures. They come from the baseline risk assessment. Because let's say, for example, as part of your baseline risk assessment, they've identified that chemical is a hazard here. So if chemical is a hazard, baseline will now suggest in terms of, okay, how does chemical become a hazard? A person can inhale it, swallow it, absorb it, get contact with it. Then in generally, it means they will say, well, how can we deal with that? So they will take the SDS of chemicals that you guys are exposed to. When they take those SDS, they read the sections because it has 16 sections in it. Then they address chemical hazards based on the SDS. They address control measures based on the SDS. So we have what we call plan, do, check, act. So which means now for them to implement control measures, they have to plan. They do a planning, isn't it? After planning, they do what they have planned to do. So they are now controlling. When they do, they have to check if it is effective. Because as they suggest based on the SDS, it is very difficult now to say this is 100%, this is correct, but it must be tested to check its effectiveness. After people have implemented this, are we still having problems arising from chemicals? If yes, why? So now they are reviewing to check what can be the proper control measure. So it's a continuous improvement. Then they can act accordingly. So that is how to address the risk. What? The risk assessment. So that is how these 16.1, 16.2, 8.1, 8.2 fulfill the duty of the employer of making sure that the workplace is free from hazards or risks are assessed and controlled. So we do have what we call a continuous risk assessment. So continuous risk assessment requires us to have checklists. Checklists are part of our continuous risk assessment. Medical certificates are part of our risk assessments. Our job safety hazard analysis are part of our continuous risk assessment. So we have a lot of documents which contribute to the continuous risk assessment. But what is done on the continuous risk assessment is pre-work inspections. That is what overall being done. No one can just get in and take a truck, drive a truck without assessing, without inspecting it, and document it in writing. So that if there are anything that is not okay, it must be reported to the immediate supervisor. Why supervisor? Because the supervisor represents the employer. So the employees, they rely on solutions from the supervisor. So the supervisor must act swiftly. So what supervisors have to do now, they now assess, because if a report came, they now look at the report, assess it. But we don't assess the report with occupational blindness. You know what we call occupational blindness is just by looking at it, not practically, by just saying, I know, guys, this is nothing, man, you can work. We'll see it. Or a supervisor now saying that, in the West, it can take 3 months. So are you not going to work for 3 months? It means you are creating a culture where you encourage those who is now that in the West, because you are designated with responsibility to represent the employer. So who is the other in the West? You are now taking away confidence from the employees. That is when you're gonna see employees now just working with hazards because they have heard the supervisor who represent the employer saying that in the West, which means in the West is not here, it's somewhere else. So now our problems are not going to be heard. So we said, as they are reported these hazards, they must be dealt with accordingly. Let us have feedback, positive feedback, which shows that we are doing something to address it. But before we give a feedback, we must assess the severity of such hazard. Is it not going to cost life? Is it not going to damage the machine itself? Is it not going to pollute the environment or cause environmental degradation or whatever? Is it not going to do that? Is it not going to bring penalties to the company if anything arises from using it? Before we give a feedback. So it's an assessment. So when we do that, it means we fulfill the duties of making sure that the workplace is free from hazards. So we know that wherever there are hazards, PPE is a requirement. So it's the duty of the employer to make sure that they provide functional PPE to the employees. And these PPE that are provided, they address correctly to minimize the hazards which employees, visitors, and everyone is exposed to. So it is the duty of the employer to provide functional equipment and correct PPE. Functional equipment, we are talking about all equipment that are used within in the West. So your skip loaders, we have manufacturing standards. So manufacturing standards, the manufacturer himself gives us how we can take care of that machinery. So he will explain in a manufacturer's manual that this machine must be serviced after so many hours. It's in a service interval. After so many hours, it's a major service. So who are we to be above the manufacturer? Because if the manufacturer is the one who really knows the mechanical structure of that machinery, so we cannot oppose what the manufacturer says. So which means in order for us to fulfill this duty, there cannot be no supervisor, manager, or CEO who is not in hand of equipment that are within his company. And those manufacturers' manuals must be read and understood by these employers' representatives. Then they create procedures based from the manufacturer's manual. Because manufacturers, they are also controlled under this OHS Act. So they also have standards that they must keep. It means whatever that they tell us to do, it is standardized. Because they are registered, they have standards, they are inspected in terms of the standards. So the representatives of the employer will now create procedures of equipment maintenance, equipment inspections, in equipment care from the manufacturer's manual. So we just take what is from the manufacturer and create the procedures. Then when these procedures are created, they must also be communicated to the employees who are using those equipment. So it means that we cannot communicate this procedure to everyone at Interwest who is not associated with the use of such equipment. So it will be now specific communication for a specific equipment. Then those people will sign to acknowledge that the procedures were communicated and they understand the procedures very well. Then supervisors will now making sure that those requirements by the manufacturers are being carried out on daily basis. So for us to have a written document as an evidence, it means checklist will be drafted. Then checklist must be filled. Supervisor must have the checklist and sign. So every time before a person takes a machinery, must inspect the machine, go to the supervisor first before operating. The supervisor will look at the checklist to check if there are no defects that have been reported. If there are no, if he can sign. If there are defects, he goes there and assess the risk and sign and give authority accordingly. So that is the requirement in terms of us making sure that there is functional equipment provided within the organization. Then, in terms of it is the duty of the employer to make sure that he provides training. So training must be provided by the employer. So it depends from your hiring policy. If your hiring policy says you hire people who are already competent, which means it's your duty as an employer to verify their competence. I think you have seen it, SABC, if I'm not mistaken. We have a CEO who was running without metric. What causes that? Poor verification. So it means if we're going to hire people who are already competent in their fields, let us verify their qualifications so that we cannot have people who are incompetent to take certain responsibility. Because it's just like, for example, now, it's easy to appoint someone. If I say now you are supervising the engineering and he doesn't have qualification in engineering, do you think he's going to supervise well? No, because he lacks knowledge. So it is the duty of the employer to say, okay, I just want him to be my supervisor. So he gonna supervise what? Okay, he's supervising engineering, but he doesn't have qualification as an engineer. Then the employer must take that person to the engineering training and have a competence before appointed. If you are going to supervise machineries, are you also have knowledge of that machinery? Because you can't supervise a forklift driver while you don't have a certificate yourself. What are you going to tell the driver? If the driver say this is what I must do, you say no, it's not the right thing. Why? Because you are doing it not based on competence knowledge, but because you have seen it happening somewhere. So we cannot manage a company or supervise a company because people next door were doing this, so you must do it. But we must manage and supervise based on the book. What does the book says? So we look at the safe systems of work now. So safe systems of work, they are only be achievable when people get training in their fields of expertise. So if you are an expert as a manager of transport, yourself, do you have a license? Because we cannot just hire a transport manager without a license, because that is a deadly decision. Because that person doesn't know even the National Road Traffic Act. What does it say? So how that person is going to make sure that review the procedures of drivers while he doesn't know what the law says? So we need to say, okay, you are in a transport manager. Where is your license to show that you understand the National Road Traffic Act? If our transport is transporting dangerous goods, where is your certificate for dangerous goods? So that you can know how to comply with your transportation. So the transport department will be covered, because it means that if you have a license, you know K53. So you can review your checklist, your pre-trip inspection based on what K53 says. You can now plan the route based on what advanced driving says. You can be able now to make sure that you don't violate any road traffic rules because you really know them. Then you cannot violate any dangerous goods because you are also competent. But if you see people who are normally violating the laws, if you look at who is behind them, there is lack of competence. So those are the things that we look at in terms of training. So training is the key, because without competence knowledge, you cannot prove. Yes, we know that there is a say that passion determines efficiency more than qualification. Yes, it is there, because some people have ended up having degrees of what they don't have passion with. They just have them because that was the only opportunity that they have. They've been rejected by universities to do what they wanted to do. So they just say, I know what is there that I can do. Oh, this is what you can do. Then they do it. Yes, passion determines. That is why it is allowed within the organization to make promotions. But we are saying as long as that is done, you see that this person has got passion but is underqualified. Let that person receive training. So training starting from the 16.1 up until we get to the lowest rank employee of your company. They must be trained. Then there are certain trainings which are required as per legal appointment. We have first aiders. First aiders must be legally appointed. It's a legal appointment. Interwaste cannot function without first aiders because this addresses the emergency procedure of each and every company based on the emergency evacuation regulations. So we must have first aiders. We must have firefighters within the organization, and these firefighters must be trained specifically based on your firefighting equipment you have. So if you have fire extinguishers, they must be trained on how to use fire extinguishers. If you have hose reels, everything that you have. Because if they are just trained on a fire extinguisher and now you have hose reels, you got it. So it's a problem. It means as you appoint them, they must be restricted to what they've trained for. So that is to be done. Then firefighters have also to be, they must know your SDS because we know that problems arises from, let's say if we have fire here at Interwest, it can be either by electricity. Electricity is easy to address because we know electrical fire is easy to, yes, you can put water and whatever, then it's contained. But now, when it comes to chemical fire, if you look at all training manuals, they address it generally. So which means internally, the SDS must be present. There is a section for firefighting and fire prevention for each and every chemical. So firefighters must be trained on fire prevention based on the SDS section, firefighting based on the SDS section. Then first aiders also, the SDS must be communicated to them because there is a section, I think it's section 3 of that SDS addressing what? First aid procedures. If a person otherwise accidentally inhale, ingest, swallow, get contact with what? With the chemical. There are procedures. That's why you get the different levels. 100%. 100%. Which means our first aid boxes will be also reviewed as per our SDS. So we cannot find an SDS say there must be a water fountain. Then we find that you don't have it practically here, but it's addressed in the SDS. So the question will be, how did you allow this chemical to come while you are not prepared? Because preparedness is the key before anything comes to your company. So that is the part of training. Then we have she reps. She reps must also be trained, but I will talk about their section separately and their powers. Then there must be a safety committee. They must also be trained. I will talk about the safety committee section and their duties separately at a later stage. Then if we have any artisans within the company, if they are working with the assistants, automatically that means those artisans are supervisors. Because as long as you have an assistant working under your instruction, you are a supervisor for that person. So they get the same responsibility as the what? Because that is the safe systems of work that we are talking about. So if I'm a boilermaker artisan and I'm working with an assistant boilermaker, that person is not qualified. Whatever that he do and whatever he get authority from me. So it means I'm his supervisor. So they must appoint it. All artisans who are working with assistants must be appointed to supervise their assistants so that they have power to tell them what to do and what not to do. So that is a training party. Then other trainings will be carried out, but now that is optional. But Interwaste must make sure that every driver has got a license. But Interwaste is not forced by law to train drivers. You can hire those who are already licensed, who have experience. But if you hire people without experience, you do in what you call an induction training. You induct them on your machineries. You induct them on your trucks. They work under probation for a certain period up until they are qualified and being appointed. Forklift drivers, skip loader operators, tower crane operators, overhead crane operators, bulldozer operators, dump truck operators, any machinery operators must be trained. So if you don't train them internally, at least they must come with a valid certificate. But remember, according to the current laws, these must be renewed after two years. A renewal has to be done, but KCTO is also now taking over. All these ones will be considered as occupational certificates. so they won't be expiring, which means you need to do what you call just refresher what training on top of that certificate that they still have. It's just a proof that they've been refreshed, they are still doing something correctly. So what these trainings, as they are being done, it means now we're creating an environment where we have competent people to do their duties. So that is the duty of the employer. The employer has got another duty of reporting all incidents. So all incidents must be reported internal. So they create what we call an internal procedure for reporting. So you need to have an organogram. Organogram must be displayed at areas where visitors, employees report to duty. So that if I have a problem, I can simply go to the reception and look at the organogram so that I cannot report to the wrong people. I go according to your organogram in terms of your reporting structure. So organogram must be displayed. It's the duty of the employer to display any organogram. Then organogram must be updated so that all key players of the company are inclusive. They are there by the organogram. And everyone who is on the organogram has got an appointment letter, the CV, which shows that he's qualified for the position that you are displaying, or that he has to be easily accessible at any time when it is needed. So that is it. Then the emergence people that are trained within your organization, first aider, firefighters, evacuation marshal, evacuation coordinators, those people must also be displayed and their numbers accessible. But due to POPIA, we now make sure that we get consent first before doing that. So we don't just wake up and display them, their numbers on the wall, but we have to ask consent from those people before we do that.
In writing.
In writing. Sign it that
Yeah.
I agree. So that simply means those people, before they are trained, you must get their consent that after training, we are going to create posters with your faces and numbers because you are the important people at our company. So if now I get cut, I must not just run everywhere asking, where can I get assistance? Wait, I can easily see there. Call, please, I have an emergency here. They can come and assist rather than calling everyone within the company. No, I don't know who is the first aider. I don't know if this one is here. The help is delayed. So these people are emergency takers. They must be easily accessible at any time when there is an emergency arises. So that is why posters and display must be there. Then this act that we are summarizing, this OHS Act, a summary of the chart must be displayed again. If you have other acts that are applicable to your company, environmental regulations attached to your walls. The Skills Development Act attached to your walls. Employment Equity Act attached to the walls. So that people can be able to access the summary requirement of those legislation. If a person need a leave, before they took a leave, they go to the employment equity, isn't it? They read now that it is addressed there. How many leave days per year an employee must have because it's their right. Sick leave, what is the procedures, what is the processes? The UIF is there attached, what is the procedures? COIDA, what is the procedures? Now we have POPIA, what is so all those charts, safety charts must be attached and displayed so that everyone can have access to them. So that is display. Then all people that are legally liable. So when I'm talking about, we know that all of us, we are legally liable for our actions. But we have people who are specifically responsible as employers. In their offices, they must have at least an OHS Act PDF, whether a soft copy or a hard copy, so that they always have to read, understand the act, because we manage the company based on the sections. We manage the company based on the regulations. We don't just bring our home rules to the company, but the legislative rules to the company. So it's a requirement. So if now we have a problem with people understanding it, in the OHS training will be a requirement again, additional requirement. Then legal liabilities we are doing is a legal requirement. so that if now people say I wasn't aware, you cannot say I was not aware because you have a proof that you have been trained on your liabilities. So as long as you are now here, there is no law that you must not interpret. Because if you fail to interpret, it shows that
You already signed.
you got it. Yes, you have already committed.
Yeah.
So you must know them. So we know that with this one-day training, we are not going to cover all the laws, but it's a food for thought where you need to have PDFs of these laws, because whatever that we are discussing is straight from the book of law. So remember, at church it's a Bible. At workplace is OHS Act. If we were in the mine, it's the Mining Health and Safety Act. In aviation, so those are our Bibles. So we always have to read it to show that we are committed to excellence. So that is the training, the training and the reporting structure. So for us to create an organogram, making sure that all incidents are reported immediately within our company, and near misses must be reported. So how that can be encouraged within the company? We spoke about the feedback. If I came and report and I get a negative feedback, tomorrow I will not report again. Unless if you caught me on the camera, then that's when I can come and say yes. But I see no use to report, because wherever we report, there is no action. So whenever there is a report, why do we report? So reporting is a requirement of OHS Act under Section 24. If we go to Section 24, they tell us that all incidents, not accidents, incidents must be reported immediately. I think we know the difference between an accident and an incident. What is the difference there?
The accident is something that actually hurt you.
It
happened.
It happened.
Situation and the incident is
That could have happened.
Okay, yes. So an incident is something that if it is not controlled, it can lead to harm, loss, damage, or danger.
Can
So-
lead to accident.
Yes, it's an incident. So now they are saying all incidents must be reported immediately. So near misses, they are part of the incident. So they must be reported. As they are reported, Section 31 requires us to investigate. So if they report to us, it doesn't mean like they are just giving us an idea, or they are just sharing with us, or they are doing it for you to give them a warning to now look, oh, yeah, no, we must give you a warning. No. A warning comes after a root cause analysis. A forklift operator was involved in an accident. We cannot just wake up and say, yeah, come for hearing. We must investigate the root cause. So root cause, you know what they call unfair dismissal. Unfair dismissal is when a person is dismissed. Yes, you can see a problem from the surface, but there is a root which causes that. So if you don't uproot the root, that person can even go to the CCMA to claim, to say, no, it was an unfair dismissal. Because now if you go there now, at Interways, you will see all forklifts are leaking. You will see all tires are bad. You will see seat belts are not working. Are you getting it? Then if they send private inspectors, they will see for sure everything that was said is not working. Then they call it unfair dismissal. So we are saying that if an incident arises, let us find what contribute to this incident. Address the root. Our driver got a ticket because he was answering a call while he was driving. Then you come and say, how did you answer a call? You know. That is why you have a license. Only to find the person who was calling him is a supervisor. Who that if he doesn't answer is a problem again. Are you getting it? So we need to see what is contributing to our drivers answering calls on the road. What can be the solution? Let us have handless what? Devices. Hands-free, so that we cannot use our hands to touch the phone, answer the phone. At least it is just hands-free. Then people can communicate while you are concentrating. So if that incident happened, let's say one driver was given a ticket of answering a call while driving, the company must investigate it, isn't it? That is what the law says. After investigating, we must have solution. So one straight solution is engineering control, hands-free devices. So did you do that? If not, why are you now dismissing this guy? Because it was your responsibility to provide functional equipment which suits the environment your drivers are exposed. One of that environment supervisors can call, sometimes just to find whereabouts, sometimes to find whatever. So when they call and this guy doesn't pick it as an important information, how are you going to address it? Okay, so now that is why we have this. So if you have this, we create what we call, after every investigation, we create what we call a corrective action report. Corrective action report tells us that, okay, this was the incident reported on this day. We do a risk assessment of this incident because they are not all the incident that we must address immediately. Some of them we need time to address them. Some we need budget to address. So that is why we assess their ranking, their risk. That okay, no, it was a high risk. So anything which is a high risk must be carried out within 24 hours. Because high risk means stop. People must not work up until it is corrected. Medium risk, it means people must proceed with a caution. So what is a caution in workplace is a procedure. There must be written procedures to address the situation while we are waiting for the proper control measure. So that is why we investigate. So now under section 24 of reporting, there are certain incidents that must be reported to the Department of Labor. So we spoke about internally, then externally to the Department of Labor if the machine ran out of control. If there is a spillage that became out of control, it gets to the drainage system, must be reported to the inspectors. If it is an incident that led to someone became amputated or disabled, that must be reported to the Department of Labor. Death of someone must be reported to the Department of Labor. If it is an incident that led to someone not being able to come to work for 14 days, reported to the Department of Labor. So the dangerous occurrences must be reported to the Department of Labor. So the Department of Labor, okay, it is up to them to also do an external investigation after reporting or to work on your internal investigation and give recommendations. So that has to be done. It's a liability by the employer, and those who are representing the employer they must make sure that those incidents listed under section 24 are reported. All investigation as per section 31 are done. We can adopt any of the techniques that addresses the root cause, like 5 why technique, asking the why question 5 times. Why were you answering the call while you were driving? Just because my supervisor was calling me. Why was your supervisor calling you knowing that you are on the road? Now that question must be answered by the supervisor. Yeah, no, because the client changes to say, no, you must not deliver it. So I was trying to save petrol and diesel. So I wanted to make him come back. Why did the client cancel while the driver is already out of the company? No, because we don't have any client or relationship policy on cancel or a cancellation policy existing. So that is why they do that. Are you getting it? So the root cause will get you to say there must be a cancellation policy. There must be any what. So that is how we address this situation. Not just giving what we see on the branches and leaves as the problem. The problem is hidden underground, and that is must be addressed. So that is section 31. Then we do have our section 17. Section 17 is a requirement by the OHS Act that she-rep must be appointed. Wherever we have 20 and above employees, there must be an appointed she-rep, and one she-rep can accommodate up to 50 employees. So up to 50 employees can be accommodated by one she-rep, but it depends now with your risk assessment. If you have different departments, it means we can have at least one what? She rep per department. So the number can increase accordingly. But the law gives us in a maximum of 50 per one she rep. As long as now we have she reps, there will be a requirement for a safety committee. So section 18, the duties of the she reps are explained. She reps must carry out their duties during the normal working hours. She reps must have the right to report straight to the inspectors. So they can jump all of you, skip all of you, skip the whole organogram of your company and go straight to the inspectors. They accompany inspectors if they come for an audit. They carry also part of audits. They do risk assessment, hazard identification. Those are the duties of the she reps. So she reps are appointed under section 17. Their duties as per section 18. Then automatically this she rep became part of the safety committee under section 19. Section 19 requires a safety committee to be established, and this safety committee must have what we call a chairperson, a person who leads the committee, and the she rep are part of that committee. The duty of the safety committee are explained under section 20, and one of their duty is to make sure that there are recommendations to all safety meetings and the incidents that are reported internally. They also assist with audits as well. Safety culture compliance is the duty of the safety committee. Then these she rep that we are talking about, they are nominated. They are nominated and elected because she rep represent the employees. So the employees are represented by the she rep. So employees must select people who can represent them. Because according to the law, there must be quarterly meetings. So quarterly is a maximum time. But you can even do monthly, you can do weekly, depends on your capability.
At minimum 3 months.
Minimum, yes. So 3 months there must be a meeting. Safety meetings. So she rep must be there in the safety meetings. Why are they there? They are now addressing the grievances of the employees in the regards or grounds of safety. So otherwise they will be telling you that our PPE that you are giving us, this one and this one, they can get dirty easily, contaminated easily, according to the HAZCAM regulations. We must, after being exposed, before we get to the what we call to other people, we must be decontaminated. So wash bays must be there. So after decontaminating, we are not allowed to get into the same clothes. So what the company has, so they are just bringing forward the grievances of the employees. Then now recommendation will be made. Then employers also, they are represented by these appointees that we spoke about. 16.2 part of the committee, 16.1 if it's there, 8.1, 8.2, they are part of the committee to represent also the employer. The employer conveying messages of his grievances as well to the employees so that an agreement will be reached and a continuous improvement will be achieved. So that is our section 18, 19, and 20. Then under section 13, the rights of the employees is explained. What are those rights?
But if you nominate and you choose
Mhm.
share,
Mhm.
okay, so they're talking on behalf of the other workers
Mhm.
for safety concerns.
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean they have to get extra money for that?
No, there is no
Okay,
law.
no, that's why. That's not that we're going that way. Just to make sure,
Mhm.
because I know that is the mindset of most of the guys. Listen, I'm going for training. I'm bettering myself.
Mhm.
Why don't I get more money for that?
Yeah, unless if that person,
But it's not in law that we have to pay them more money.
there is
Okay,
no
that's
law.
all we need.
There is no law. But unless if you hire
Safety
a,
officer.
yeah, or a she rep, otherwise you don't afford a
But how are you going to hire a sheriff if you have to vote for one?
No, you might hire someone who's neutral.
Okay.
Yeah, you might hire someone who's neutral.
External.
Then that person will become the chairperson now of the safety committee. You
Okay.
get it? Then that's where now you can pay. But these heat there is no law which says there is remuneration.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, but we are not saying if you have money, don't give them if you have.
Which business got money? You need more money.
Yeah, so that is the sections.
Okay.
Then 13 is the rights of the employees. So in summary, the right of the employee, right not to be victimized. They have right to lawful information. They have right to their leave days, right to the agreed salary on the agreed date, and many more rights that they have. Right to training, right to correct PPE. So they have many rights that have to be fulfilled. And who fulfill those rights? All those who represent the employers. But they also have their duty under Section 14. Section 14 is the duties of the employees. So their duty is to follow lawful instructions. So the word is lawful. So if you tell them to do something unlawful, they have the right to refuse it. They have the right to wear PPE provided to them. They have right to follow all procedures given. They have the duty, to follow all the procedures given to them. They have the duty to report all incidents immediately. They have a duty to also assist in the investigations. So, as witnesses or whatever of any incidents that takes place, they have right to uh, maintain the machineries that they are using by cleaning them, sometimes lubricating if there is no appointed person specifically for that. So it's their duty as the employees, as explained under section 14. Then all of you will now go to section 37. Section 37 is mandatories. So when we are talking about mandatory, we are talking about agreements. Agreements. So contracts, that's where contracts comes from. So we don't give instructions and responsibility by word of mouth. We give them by signing a contract. These contracts must be reviewed. As per quality management, after 2 years, we must review the what? The contracts. Because if now you hire me, I'm so enthusiastic, I'm so happy that I cannot read all of the terms and conditions. But when I'm now 2 years at your company, I now have, I now know things. I can read nicely and ask so that we can address anything that is not proper in the contracts or give emphasis on what is needed by the contracts. So people are reminded. So reviewing of documents is a quality management system requirement where we normally they give us a time frame of say after 2 years at least review your documents. Although you can do it yearly, that is the most recommendable, but you have up to 2 years to review. So all agreements, but agreements must be specific. So we normally need agreements which are smart. So when we are talking about smart, they must be specific, they must be manageable, they must be achievable, they must be have time bound and realistic. So that is an agreement that we want. Not an agreement with a bit of hidden words in the legal jargon, which is too heavy for the great service that you guys are hiring or from ones that you are hiring. Let it suit their level of academy. So if I'm a grade one, if you write legal jargon, do you think I understand anything? So there must be a proof that it was correctly interpreted. If it happens that it is in the legal jargon, then there must be a written proof that the interpretation was provided. So we are saying those agreements must be smart. Then when we have agreements, we work according to the agreement. So that also covers section 37.2, also covers the agreements by contractors. So our contractors, if you have any agreements with contractors, then they make sure that you have their safety file of that contract, how they manage their health and safety when they are working within your organization. So safety file is a mandatory of safety management. unless if the agreement states that Interwaste is still responsible. Which means if you agree to be responsible, if any employee of the contractor gets injured, it's you.
It's you, yeah.
But if they give you a safety file and the agreement stipulate that the
their
contractor
liability.
is their liability, let it be stipulated. Let you also ask for their safety management system. How are they going to manage the safety while they are here within Interwaste? That is section 37. Then section 38 now is penalties. So these are penalties under the OSHA Act. We're gonna look at the environmental management regulations. We're gonna look at the Environmental Conservative Act, which have all their own penalties. As you guys, you are dealing with the environmental management actually with this waste management. So, but with OSHA Act, it says if anyone, or let me interpret it as it is at the moment, you are all reliable 50-50, employees and the employer, to safeguard your workplace, to make sure that your workplace is safe. So it's a 50-50 responsibility. It's a 50-50 liability to make sure that our environment is safe. If you fail, the employee can be charged a penalty of amount that does not exceed 50,000, or being in prison for a period that does not exceed 12 months, or both. That is, if you fail to do anything of your responsibilities for OSHA Act. Employers, an amount that does not exceed 100,000, or a period in prison that does not exceed 24 months, that is 2 years, or both. That is, if you didn't do your responsibility as per OSHA Act. So those are penalties. So now it's almost 1 hour when we have started. So we'll get a stretch break for 10 minutes. After stretch break, we'll now come and discuss about the Environmental Management Act. Okay.